Hi everyone, welcome back to Grounded Haven. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing some more Pantry Challenge meals. I have 4 new meals that we ate in the last week, where I've used, of course, lots of pantry ingredients and also a good amount of homegrown and preserved vegetables. For our first meal, I'm going to be cooking up some of this edamame. This had been blanched and then frozen, and I can just boil it straight from frozen. So I have a pot of water that is boiling here. I'm going to add a little bit of salt to flavor the water, and then I can put the frozen edamame directly into this boiling water, and I will just have to boil this for about 5 minutes. I love that this edamame is so quick to cook, even from frozen, and it wasn't too hard to preserve either. I'm really looking forward to growing more of this next year because it makes for a really quick and easy side dish to a meal. After 5 to 6 minutes, I've tested one of my edamame and just made sure that the beans are nicely cooked and tender inside, and then I can take them out of the water. Then I'm going to drain my pot and dump all that water, add a few teaspoons of vegetable oil, and then a few minced garlic cloves. I'll let that garlic fry in the oil and flavor it for a couple of minutes. And then I can add my drained edamame pods back into here. I'm also going to season this with a good amount of salt and also a little bit of soy sauce. So that's it. Under 10 minutes we have this delicious edamame side dish. And to serve with the meal, I'm just opening up this tin of fish that we have in our pantry. This is fried dace with pepper. We've never tried this tinned fish before, but I've seen it in the Asian supermarket a bunch, and a couple of times ago we picked up one of them to try out. Apparently this brand of tinned fish is supposed to be a staple in Chinese households. I don't know why I never had it growing up, but it turned out to be really delicious. And I think the one that's most common is the one that is flavored with black bean paste. So we are definitely going to try that out next time because we really enjoyed this tinned fish. I'm just going to take it out of the can so it's easier for us to eat, and it just has a very lovely texture. It really tastes like it has been freshly fried. It doesn't taste like it's from a can at all. I'm just going to top that off with some scallions to freshen it up a little bit. And that is pretty much our meal. I also served it with some pickled daikon and radish, and also some leftover wintermelon soup that I had from a meal that I showed last week. This is a super easy weeknight meal. The edamame took less than 10 minutes to make, and all I had to do was open up a tin of that fish and heat up some leftover soup and some rice, and that's all there was to it. Again, this tinned fish was incredible. If you can find it at an Asian supermarket, I would definitely recommend it, and we will absolutely be buying more of it because it is just a super easy last-minute addition or main course for a meal. For our next meal, I made a stir-fried vegetable noodle dish and had some more wintermelon soup. First up, I'm going to be slicing into a fresh wintermelon because I've used up all of my pre-cut wintermelon in the freezer. So I have this big boy here that probably weighs about 20 pounds. And I am going to be using some of it to make a soup to go with our stir-fried noodles, but as usual, the rest of it is going to go into the freezer. It's a little bit of a chore when I have to cut into a brand new wintermelon, but then it makes the following weeks and months really easy because I'll have pre-cut cubes that I can throw into soups, and I won't have to cut into another wintermelon for quite a while. And this is a wintermelon that we harvested back in September, I believe, and it just preserves itself. It has this nice, thick, waxy skin that keeps the wintermelon really fresh. So we just keep ours at room temperature and try to keep them in a cool, dry place, and they will last well into the spring. So even though it is January right now, this wintermelon is still looking great and doesn't have any signs of rot or any soft spots. So that is one thing that I love about growing wintermelon. And I do get asked pretty often what wintermelon tastes like, and it's always kind of hard to explain something to someone who has never had it before, but I guess I would compare it mostly to like zucchini, but it probably has less flavor. It's pretty similar to other gourds though. I think that it tastes a lot like an Italian cucuzzi gourd that we grew this year. So it's just got like a really light vegetal flavor, very mildly sweet, but definitely not sweet like a watermelon. And I also get asked a lot how we usually cook our wintermelon. And the way I'm going to show you today is the main way that we use up our wintermelon, and it's just in a simple soup that we serve alongside meals multiple times a week. And if you're unsure about growing such a big vegetable, since it does take up a lot of space and you do end up with a lot of wintermelon, and you're not sure if you're gonna like it, you can always try going to an Asian grocery store and buying a wedge of wintermelon. Usually they don't even sell these whole, they'll cut them into wedges, and you just buy a portion of the wintermelon since it's just so much for most people to have at one time. So you can look for just a wedge of it and try it for yourself. Someone else had also commented that they tried wintermelon and they thought that it was very disappointing. I mean, they put it a little more rudely than that, but I can understand how to some people wintermelon doesn't really taste like much. So maybe you would wonder like why bother growing it. But like I said, this wintermelon stores really well and it's a staple of our winter meals. And even though it has a very mild flavor, I usually cook it in like a nice, rich, flavorful broth, and it's a great addition to soup, and it still has a lot of nutrients that make it really healthy, so I am always really thankful for our wintermelon harvest because they are a great source of our vegetables in the winter. It's very traditional with Chinese meals to always have a small bowl of soup for each person, and I know that there are similar ideas in Korean and Japanese meals as well, and I think that this practice has really great health benefits. It's kind of like how bone broth has gotten so popular these days, and people know that it's really healthy for you. Basically, the soup that we're going to be making is bone broth, but also some added vegetables in it, so I think that having some of it every day provides us with really nutrient-dense food. So for our soup, I'm putting maybe about a quart or a quart and a half of wintermelon cubes into a pot, along with a couple of carrots that I've cut into large chunks. Then I'm adding a quart of our homemade chicken broth, along with some salt, and I'm just going to boil this on the stove. After about 15 minutes, the wintermelon will get translucent and soft, and that's when you know that it's done. Even after using a bunch of wintermelon for the soup for this meal, this is the rest of the wintermelon all cut up. You can see that I have a lot of wintermelon. I ended up with 11 quart size containers that are all going to go in the freezer for future use. Now I can move on to preparing the vegetables for the stir-fried noodle dish. First, I am taking out a couple of dried shiitake mushrooms, and I'm going to be soaking these in some hot water and let those soak and soften up while I prepare the other ingredients. First, I have these two tiny little shallots. These are homegrown shallots, and they are like the very last of my supply, so I'm down to the really tiny little ones. So I'm just trying to use those up. I'm just gonna slice those up and set them aside. Then I also have 2 green onions that I'm going to slice. I'm going to slice the white and light green parts and put them with my vegetables that I'm going to stir fry first. And the more tender dark green parts I'm going to set aside in a separate bowl so that I can throw them into the dish at the very end. Next, I have 1 carrot that I'm going to shred into long ribbons using my julienne peeler. Next, I'm going to slice up some cabbage. I have a head of homegrown cabbage. This is our very last one from the fall and winter garden. And we actually harvested this well over a month ago, probably sometime in December, if not November. And it has just been sitting in the fridge and doing really well. It still looks incredible and has very few signs of wilting or getting older. And I was going to use like a quarter of the head, but then a couple of the outer leaves fell off as I was cutting the base of it, and I think that will be enough for this dish. So I'm just taking those leaves and cutting off any of the kind of soft wilty parts, but for the most part, even these outer leaves are looking really great. I really love how cabbage stores so well just in the fridge without doing anything to it, so it's a great thing for the fall and winter garden. And also just great if you're trying to space out your grocery store trips. You can get a couple heads of cabbage and they should store for up to a month so that you don't need to go to the store as often. So I've just cut up those few leaves into some nice thin strips, And then I'm going to slice up those shiitake mushrooms that I have been soaking. They absorb a lot of water as they're soaking, so I'm just going to squeeze out some of that water. And then I'm going to cut out those kind of hard stems of the shiitake mushrooms, but the caps I'm going to slice up thinly. I'm also saving the soaking liquid that I soaked the mushrooms in, by the way, because that liquid has a lot of flavor that we're going to use in the noodles. Dried shiitake mushrooms are such a great ingredient. It's used a lot in Chinese cooking, and they just have an incredible amount of very mushroomy, umami flavor. Lastly, I have 2 garlic cloves that I'm going to finely chop up. Here is our beautiful plate of prepped vegetables that are ready to be stir-fried. Before we get to that, I'm going to be boiling the noodles for the dish. I'm using these store-bought dried egg noodles. They look kind of like the noodles you would get in a ramen packet, and I just find them really convenient to have to make a quick noodle soup or a stir-fried noodle dish like I'm doing today. So I'm going to boil those for about 5 minutes in some water, and when they are tender, I'm going to drain them and set them aside. Next, in my pan, I'm putting a tablespoon of vegetable oil, and I have a few eggs that I've beaten, and I'm going to fry these eggs first. Immediately after pouring them into the pan, I take my spatula and push those eggs around, and this is going to form these really nice big ribbons of egg. And I'm only going to let this cook about 80% of the way. And once it's to the point where I can pick up a big mass of the eggs, I'm going to remove it from the pan, and they're going to finish cooking when we add them back into the noodles at the end. I'm going to add some more oil to the pan, and then I can add in all of my vegetables all at once and season them with some salt. I'm going to stir fry these for about a minute just to let everything kind of soften up. Then I'm going to add in the chopped garlic cloves and let that cook for another minute. Now I can add the cooked and drained egg noodles back into the pan. And I'm going to add about a tablespoon or so of that reserved mushroom soaking liquid. And then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of oyster sauce to season the noodles. Now I just have to mix everything together and try and get those vegetables mingling with the noodles. And then at the very end, I can add the tips of the green onions that I reserved earlier, and also the par-cooked egg, which is going to finish cooking in the last couple of minutes. And I'll just break up those big chunks of eggs with my tongs and mix those around. And the stir-fried noodles are done, and this dish tastes so much better than any takeout noodles that you can get, and it's a lot healthier as well. It still has a ton of flavor with the oyster sauce and also those shiitake mushrooms adding so much umami savoriness, and also the vegetables were so nice and fresh and still kind of crispy, and this is definitely one of my favorite kind of like comfort meals to make at the moment. The next meal is going to be a really easy weeknight pasta dish. Today I'm going to be using some dried pasta. This is homemade pasta that I made quite a few months ago. I think I made it back in spring or summer, back when we had an abundance of eggs, and I've made it into kind of like fettuccine style noodles. I have a pot of boiling water, which I'm going to salt generously, and then boil my pasta until it is al dente. I'm so glad that I made up a few batches of pasta to dry in the summer, because this winter we have not had as many eggs from our chickens, and the pasta has been a really nice way to preserve it for a later date. This is the last of my homemade pasta, so I will probably have to have a pasta making day sometime soon. When the pasta is just about done, I'm going to reserve about half a cup of the pasta water before I drain my noodles. I'm going to drain my pasta, and we're going to toss the pasta with some of this canned eggplant caponata that I made in the summer. This caponata has some tomatoes, but also eggplant, peppers, and capers, and it also has a good amount of lemon juice in it, so it's a nice tangy and savory dressing for the pasta. And all I have to do is toss this jar of caponata with our cooked pasta, and I'm also adding some frozen cherry tomatoes. I love that you can just stick cherry tomatoes straight into the freezer. It's a really easy way to preserve them, and I can just toss it into pasta or throw them directly into soups or any other kind of dish. And they add a really nice fresh tomato flavor to this canned sauce that we're using. This caponata is really good since it has things other than tomatoes in there. It uses a lot of different things that we harvest from the garden. It's also one of the few water bath canning recipes that I've seen that includes eggplant. So if you've been looking for a way to can eggplant, this is a great recipe that uses some of it along with other vegetables. And it makes for a more nuanced sauce than a straight up tomato sauce. So I'm definitely going to be making this again this year. It's more tart than sweet, since we do have capers and also lemon juice in order to get the right acidity level for it to water bath can. And this will meld really nicely with a nice sprinkling of freshly grated Parmesan cheese. That cheesiness adds some nice richness and saltiness to kind of balance out those other flavors of the caponata. We also decided to have some other things along with our pasta. First off, I'm just finishing off this can of dilly beans that we had opened in the fridge. And then I also opened a can of sardines. I guess we were just having a little bit of a canned fish week. I'm going to take those sardines out of the can and put them in a fresh bowl and then drizzle it with some lemon juice, and this will make it taste nice and fresh. These sardines make for a good kind of like appetizer, and we had them with some crackers that we also topped with some cowboy candy, which is pickled candied jalapenos, and it's a really nice pairing with the sardines. This meal felt very Mediterranean to me, and we had some nice red wine to enjoy with it. And even though it was a really quick and easy meal, and I just had to boil some pasta and throw in some of that eggplant caponata that was already made, it felt like a really nice and fancy meal. For our last meal, I'm going to be making a rice cake soup along with some zucchini pancakes and some stir-fried anchovies with nuts. For the soup, I'm going to put a quart of chicken broth into my pot. Since this is homemade chicken broth that doesn't have a lot of salt, I'm adding a little bit of salt to flavor it, and I'm also adding a teaspoon of fish sauce as well. This is going to add some nice umami flavor and also a little bit of extra saltiness. I'm going to put this on the stove and let the chicken broth heat up, and we'll finish off the soup later. And in the soup, we're going to be having these sliced rice cakes that we got at H Mart. And I'm taking some of those rice cakes, putting them in a bowl, and I'm going to rinse them in some water and also make sure that all of the rice cakes are separated. So if they're a little bit stuck together, then I'll just pull them apart with my hands. And then before we use them, we're going to drain off that water. I'll set those rice cakes aside for now, and meanwhile I'm going to work on the zucchini pancakes. First thing I'm going to do is slice up one scallion. This was a pretty large scallion, so I'm only using one, but you can use as many as you want, or you can also just use a regular yellow onion and slice that up. And I'm going to move this into my mixing bowl and also add some shredded zucchini. This is zucchini that was frozen. I've defrosted and drained it, so it's nice and dry and doesn't add too much extra liquid to this. I'm also going to add 1 egg and some salt to flavor it, and I'm going to mix up these ingredients. Next, I'm going to add some all-purpose flour. I think I added about half a cup of that. And then I'm going to quickly mix this up just so I can get an idea of how much water I'll need. And then I'll slowly add in some water. And I usually just do this until I get the right consistency, because the amount of water you add can vary based on what kind of vegetables you put in there and how wet they are. And I just add enough until it's kind of like a thick pancake batter. Then I'm going to fry these up in my pan in a few tablespoons of vegetable oil. I just like to do little spoonful dollops into my pan to make kind of these like 3 to 4 inch pancakes. I'm going to let each side of the pancake fry on medium heat for 3 to 4 minutes and then flip it over. I also like to press them down a little bit with the back of my spatula just to make sure that each side has nice contact with the pan. And this has been a really great way for us to use up a lot of our shredded zucchini, because that is the main way I preserved a lot of our zucchini from this past year, and we have a lot of it in the freezer. But I think this is going to be a great way for us to use up a lot of it. When I remove each batch of pancakes from the pan, I like to put them on a baking sheet and keep them warm in an oven that's set to about 200 degrees while I fry up the rest of the pancakes and finish off the other parts of the meal. So I'm just going to do the same thing with my second batch of zucchini pancakes, and then we will move on to the stir-fried anchovies and nuts. While I've been frying off those zucchini pancakes, the chicken broth in my pot has heated up, so I'm going to add my bowl of drained rice cakes. So those just need about 5 minutes to soften up and cook. Once I'm done with my second batch of pancakes and they've been moved out of the pan, I have some of these small dried anchovies that we got at H Mart last time we were there. I'm going to be using a few ounces of this, and I just put them straight into my pan. I haven't added any extra oil yet, and I'm going to let them fry off in this mostly dry pan and let them toast a little bit. After a couple of minutes, I'll add some vegetable oil and also some cashews. Usually I see this made with peanuts, but I didn't have peanuts, so I'm using cashews instead, and I think it works great. I'm going to mix those around and let those nuts toast for a couple minutes as well. Then I'm going to add 1 clove of garlic that I've minced. I'm also going to add a tablespoon of honey and a tablespoon of gochujang, which is a Korean red chili pepper paste. The last additions are going to be a teaspoon or so of sesame oil and also a sprinkling of toasted sesame seeds. I'm going to make sure that everything is mixed together and there are no big clumps of gochujang or honey, and that will be it for that dish. Meanwhile, here are how the rice cakes are looking in the soup. You can see that they are really nice and soft and they have such a beautiful chewy texture once they're cooked. And last thing I'm going to add is a couple of beaten eggs, and I'm going to slowly drizzle this into the soup, kind of like how you would make egg drop soup. So pour in a nice thin stream and don't stir it immediately. It will cook as it hits that hot broth and form these nice ribbons of egg. Here's the finished meal. I topped off the rice cake soup with some sliced scallions, and then we have our zucchini pancakes, also our stir-fried anchovies and nuts that are salty, spicy, sweet, and crunchy all at once. They are so delicious and such a flavor bomb, and perfect paired with a nice bowl of white rice. And then we also had a little dish of kimchi on the side as well. This was such a good meal. We really loved this rice cake soup, which I've never made before. There was so much flavor with the rich homemade chicken broth that I used, and the chewy texture of the rice cakes with that silky egg is just so good. The pancakes are great and a wonderful staple, and I think I'll be repeating that a lot in the weeks to come. Everything was just 10 out of 10. So that's it for the 4 meals that I'm sharing in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.